Punishment in ancient China. Hook. Ancient China is known for its historical contributions and innovations. However, this period also had a dark side, which was the practice of punishment. It led to a series of cruel punishments that were inflicted on society at large. Introduction. Hello everyone! Today I will talk about the punishments in ancient China. There are many cruel punishments that have been inflicted on society on a large scale during that period. Many people still do not know about these atrocities, but hopefully this video will bring some awareness to all of them. So sit back and enjoy! Punishment was an important part of ancient China. In order to keep society functioning, the state needed to punish those who break the laws that they had set. This included both people who broke the law by committing a crime and people who broke the law by working against the state. The punishment that these people received would be determined by their crimes and their importance to the state. For example, if someone stole a handful of rice off of a market table, they would most likely receive a small fine, whereas if someone killed thousands of people in a war, they would most likely receive death or life in prison. In ancient China, rulers would often enact capital punishment to show that they were powerful. This was done in order to maintain social order and to make sure the people knew who was in charge. It was also an effective way of deterring others from rebelling against the government. While capital punishment is no longer used as a means of punishment in China, it is still widely used as a form of punishment in some other parts of the world. In ancient China, the belief was that people were born sinners and had to atone for their sins through painful and often fatal punishments. This included things like being whipped, having boiling water poured over one's head, or having opium inserted into one's mouth. In order to prevent these sinners from harming society, harsh punishments were given to them as an act of rehabilitation. However, as the population grew increasingly large and crime rates soared, these punishments became increasingly cruel and oppressive. Why did they do it? What was the purpose of these penalties? There are a number of theories on why ancient China carried out punishment and the purpose behind it. Some believe that it was a way to maintain social order and prevent crimes from happening, while others believe that it was used as a form of retribution. Whatever the case may be, punishment in ancient China served a crucial purpose and is still used today to maintain social order. In ancient China, the punishment was usually divided into 5 categories: death penalty, mutilation, torture, penal servitude, and exile. The death penalty was the most severe form of punishment that involved taking a life. Mutilation involved injuring or maiming a person so badly that it could not be restored. Torture involved inflicting severe pain on a person in order to extract information or confessions. Penal servitude was the most common type of punishment that involved serving someone else in some way, such as working on a plantation or in jail. Exile meant moving away from one's home and community permanently. In ancient China, there were 2 types of punishment: physical and mental. Physical punishments were given to those who had violated the law, while mental punishments were given to those who had insulted or threatened the government. Mental punishments varied from being forced to stand in the sun for hours to being put in a dark and lonely cell. The goal of these punishments was to humiliate and chastise the offender and to make them aware that their actions could have serious consequences. Mental punishment in ancient China often involved humiliation, exposing to cold weather or darkness, deprivation of food, or solitary confinement. While the exact methods and purposes of mental punishment varied from era to era, the overarching goal was always to punish individuals for their wrongdoing and to reform them into better citizens. Today, we largely eschew physical punishment as a way to punish someone, instead preferring more humane and effective methods such as detention or fines. However, mental punishment is still an integral part of Chinese culture and is often used as a form of discipline in schools. In ancient China, the most common form of punishment was hard labor. Common offenders would be confined to a small, dark cell where they would have to do hard labor such as digging dishes or carrying stones. If the offender was particularly troublesome, he or she might be beaten or whipped. In some cases, the convict might be boiled alive in oil or fed to hungry lions. The emperor would also punish people by ending the person's life. Back in ancient China, the emperor was not just the ruler, but also the judge, and he had the power to punish anyone he deemed fit with death. This often happened when someone committed a crime that was punishable by death, such as treason or murder. If an offender was found guilty by a jury of their peers, they would receive a sentence such as beheading or being thrown into a burning pit. However, if the emperor decided that the offender deserved death, he had the final say and could execute them without any form of the judicial process. In ancient China, the most common punishment for those deemed not virtuous was to spend eternity at the bottom of the ocean with a rock on their head. This harsh punishment was meted out to those who had committed crimes such as theft, adultery, or vandalism. In order to ensure that these wrongdoers would never be able to cause harm again, they were buried at sea with a boulder tied around their necks. Over time, as sea levels rose and the ocean became less hospitable, these sinners were eventually discovered and interred in more permanent locations. In order to ensure that the prisoner got the most punishing experience possible, punishments would be meted out consecutively instead of randomly. The authorities believed that it was important to give the prisoner the harshest punishment possible in order to make an impact. This was done in order to ensure that the prisoner had learned his lesson in the most effective way possible and did not relapse into his old ways. By meting out punishments in a consecutive rather than a random manner, the prisoner was more likely to internalize the lessons he had learned and act upon them in a constructive manner. This ensured that justice was served and that the offender was made to pay for his crimes. In ancient China, punishment would typically involve scars or tattoos to publicly humiliate and shame the offender. Mo, also known as king, is a form of scarring that involved the offender being tattooed on the face or forehead with indelible ink. The design would usually represent the sin or crime that the individual had committed and would be visible for all to see. This form of punishment was often reserved for those who had committed serious crimes and was meant to serve as a deterrent to others. Cutting off the culprit's nose. In ancient China, punishment could be harsh and bloody. One example of this is the practice of yi, or nose cutting. This was done without any form of anesthetic, and the offender's nose would often be cut off entirely. This barbaric punishment was used as a form of deterrence for criminals, and it was often meted out to those who had committed particularly heinous crimes. Today, yi is considered a form of torture, and it is illegal in China. Kneecap removal. Among the most notorious punishments in ancient China was yue, also known as bin, which involved amputation of the left or right foot, or both. Other sources claim that this punishment involved removal of the kneecap, which is claimed to be the source of warring among rival clans. Keeping in mind the severity of such punishments and their lasting consequences, it is clear that yue was nothing short of a brutal way to punish someone for his or her wrongdoings. Cutting of reproductive organs. Ancient China was a barbaric place where punishment for various crimes ranged from the mild to the brutal. One of the most horrific punishments was gong, or yinxing, where the male offender's reproductive organs were removed. The penis was removed and testicles were cut off. This barbaric punishment was used to punish sexual predators and rapists, and it still exists in some parts of China today. Thankfully, it is now largely obsolete and is only used in the most severe cases. Cutting the body into 4 pieces. There were a number of methods used to execute offenders in ancient China, but one of the most common ways was da pi, or the death sentence. This involved quartering the body or cutting it into 4 pieces as a way of punishing criminals for their crimes. Sometimes the offender would be hung from a tree until they died, while other times they would be burned alive. In some cases, they might be buried up to their necks in sand and then left to die. In ancient China, punishments were often seen as cruel and unfair, but they had the intended goal of deterring people from breaking the law. The punishments ranged from verbal lashings to death by stoning. However, the punishments were not always effective in dissuading people from breaking the law, and in some cases, they even backfired and sparked public outcry. For example, when Emperor Wu of Han, the founder of the Han Dynasty, decreed that anyone who killed another person would be put to death regardless of age or gender, this led to a public outcry and killed many innocent people. Today, many aspects of traditional Chinese punishment have been abandoned in favor of more humane methods. If you've ever been curious about the punishments that were once inflicted on criminals in the ancient Chinese Empire, you're not alone. In fact, many of these punishments have been abandoned or modified over the years in favor of more humane methods. For example, in the past, criminals were often whipped or beaten with hoops until they bled, or had metal rods inserted through their fingers and toes. These days, criminals are more likely to be sent to prison or receive a punishment that fits the crime. And that was a time when punishment in ancient China was quite severe. Disciplinary measures such as corporal punishment, public humiliation, and locking someone away were all commonly used. In fact, even death was not an uncommon punishment in cases of heinous crimes. But over the years, things have gradually changed, and today, punishment in ancient China is much milder. The takeaway from this video is that it is important to always adapt to the changing times in order to maintain law and order and avoid any unnecessary conflicts. Well, that's all for this video. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, we'd love it if you could share it on your favorite social media platforms. We leave you with an open question. What do you think about the punishment of ancient China? Do you have any thoughts or opinions on this? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching the video and stay tuned for more updates.